Welcome back, Lorcana players. It's Poisonous. Today I want to take a look at a new deck that I've been playing around with using red-purple, which definitely isn't a new deck, but I've added some spiciness to it using the new Moana cards to give it a different element of surprise, allowing you to shift into a big Moana and do some location hijinks. And I've had quite a bit of success with this deck on Pixelborn. I'm currently just above 70% win rate, so let's take a look at the deck list and see how it compares to other red-purple lists. So for 1-drops, we have our usual suspects, Chernobog's Magic Broom, but we're also running 4 copies of Moana Self-Taught Sailor. She's a 3/2 that costs 1, but she can't challenge unless there's a captain in play, but she does have a big body that trades into almost everything in the early game if your opponent wants to take her out, because she's just going to keep questing, and she provides the shift target for the big Moana Kakamora leader. We have our usual bounce package with Snake, Fox, and Crab. We're running the Flynn Rider line with Sisu. I'm only running 3 Sisu. I find that the 1-drop Moana also is a pretty good Flynn enabler, so it seems to run fine just with those cards. For our draw package, we're running 4 copies of Genie, 2 copies of Rabbit, 3 copies of Friends on the Other Side. We do have our Goat, Elsa, and then our removal. We have 2 Lady Tremaine, 2 Medusa, 4 Brawl, and 3 B-Preps. We also have to have a small-ish location package running 2 copies of Library and 3 copies of the Queen Castle. These cards are good locations on their own, but they're part of the strategy that we use with the Moana Shift line to move people to the locations and gain lore in the process. You can find the link to the Dreamborn deck in the description for the video. Let's take a look at the important interactions this deck uses. The first interaction we want to focus on is the Moana Shift. So this lets you shift Moana Self-Taught Sailor into Moana Kakamora Leader. You can do this as early as turn 5, which I think offers some versatility. When you do a shift, her ability Gathering Forces says when you play this character, you may move any number of your characters to the same location for free, gain 1 lore for each character you move. So this can be useful because it provides a sudden burst of lore out of nowhere. So if you have a lot of characters on the board and a location, when you do the shift, you can gain 3 or 4 lore pretty easily. This can be enough sometimes to win the game on its own. It also is important to note that this shift move option, this lore gain only happens if the characters move to that location. So if they're already at that location, you're not going to gain a lore for that character. So if you're anticipating doing the shift, sometimes it can be useful not to move your characters right away. Although if you think they're going to be removed, it may be worth weighing out whether you should or shouldn't move them on the turn before if you have the extra ink. But the sudden lore gain can be quite useful. If you move them to the library, then they can start challenging and get drawing cards. If you're moving something like a Magic Broom, it's important to quest with it before you shift the Moana. That way if you want to banish and get the double card draw, that you did that before the shift happens. Otherwise, once you do the shift, you move everything. You can't quest before you choose to do the banish. So if we look at this clip, the opponent is at 18 lore, threatening to win. We're at 14 lore, and we can quest up to 18. We don't have a Goat Bounce in hand, but we do have a Moana on board, and with 9 ink, we have the possibility to win the game here out of nowhere using the Moana Shift. So we play Queen's Castle, and then for 5, we shift Moana onto Moana, and this gains 3 lore for moving all 3 characters to the location, pushing us up to 21 lore. So it gives us a bit of a burst out of nowhere that they may not be expecting or ready to play around. The second interaction that I want to highlight is pretty similar. It involves shifting Moana, but this time she's gonna sing Be Prepared. The nice thing about this is that you can sing it 2 turns early. If you've already lost control of the board by turn 5, it can be very useful to shift Moana. Your opponent a lot of times won't expect it, and she can sing Be Prepared to clear off both sides. If you combine this with a location like the library, you move all your characters there, you gain a lore for each character, then you quest with all your characters except Moana, and then she sings Be Prepared, and then you draw a card for each character that got banished there. You can swing your way back into the game out of nowhere, so it's a pretty useful thing to do depending on the circumstance. In this board position, you can see that the opponent is quite far ahead. They have 4 characters, and we only have our Moana, which can't challenge anything that's on the board currently, but we do have a location in play. So this is a great opportunity to shift Moana, gain a lore, move her to library, sing, be prep, and wipe the whole board and get to draw a card for Moana being banished. Although the opponent does have some good card draw here as well from the banish, we are left with a location on board, which is something that we can continue to leverage to our advantage, and this early shift is probably our only hope of staying in this game at this point. The third interaction that I want to talk about is with Crab and Elsa. Obviously, if you do have 8 ink, you could play Elsa and then Crab to power her up, but a very useful combo is if on turn 3 or turn 4 you end up playing a Crab and you have it sitting on the board. Sometimes your opponent won't consider the fact that you can actually get your Crab to be banished because you can exert one of their stronger characters, like if they had a Fox or a White Rose or a Smee on board that's not exerted, you can use Elsa to exert it, trade the Crab into it, powering up the Elsa, and then she's now stronger and can challenge one of the other characters that was already exerted. So this combo is something to look out for and can be useful to set up if you have the Elsa and Crab in your hand. Try getting the Crab out on the board and getting it in position so on the next turn or the turn after you can use Elsa to take advantage of the Crab's power. The fourth interaction to discuss is with a bounce package. So your Madam Mim Fox and Madam Mim Snake are used to return characters to your hand. This deck has been a long-time staple of the meta, and I think a lot of it has to do with the bounce package and how useful it is to be able to replay certain cards at a time when it benefits you the most to use that specific card. So the 3 kind of main interactions that you want to use with your Fox and Snake are with Goat. For one, that's definitely a good way to close out the game. You play Goat, gain a lore, bounce it, gain another lore, and then you can keep replaying the same Goat over and over again to gain lore and push yourself up to 20 while your opponent can't really answer it. Can also be extremely helpful to get more card draw using your bounce package. With Rabbit, returning Rabbit to your hand and playing it again gains you 2 cards. And with the new Genie card, although it's not quite as useful for bouncing, it is such a strong card when it's on the board for questing that replaying it and keeping it safe and getting another card draw is still definitely viable. And the third type of bounce that is extremely useful in this deck is with your removal cards. So I did include Elsa in here, but it also works for Lady Tremaine and Madame Medusa more commonly, where you would pick those characters up and replay them. So you play Medusa, remove a character, next turn quest with Medusa or challenge a character, and then bounce Medusa and play her again. So it works with Elsa, Tremaine, and Medusa starting at 7 and 8 ink. You can replay them, and then with Fox you can replay them at 8 and 9 ink, and it's extremely powerful. When your opponent is top decking and you have a Lady Tremaine, so each time they play a character you remove it and then pick up the Tremaine so you can remove their character again on the following turn, can really lock them out of a game and be a really strong finish. A big part of the decision making with this deck is knowing which characters to bounce and when, and that's, I think, something that you can only figure out by practicing with the deck and getting some experience playing. Let's take a look at the opening lines for our Brave Little Sailor deck. On the play, we want to have a 1-drop. Ideally, it's going to be Chernabog's Followers or Moana. Moana's really good at being a Flynn enabler, and Chernabog's gives you the option to banish to draw or leave it on the board for another turn. Turn 2, we definitely want Flynn Rider. Flynn Rider is an insanely strong turn 2 play, requires a careful consideration from your opponent to how they're going to respond to prevent you from getting your 3 lore gain because it's such a huge swing. And on turn 3, we want to follow it up with the Sisu. This card usually on turn 3 has a lot of strength and will almost guarantee to enable Flynn unless your opponent removes it. And then on turn 4, ideally we hit into some card draw like Genie or Rabbit, but on the play, a turn 4 location, Queen's Castle, is extremely strong. It gains a lot of lore, requires an opponent response, but it's not always useful if they are building up a board with like foxes and crabs and things like that. You don't really want to play it for it to just die immediately. On the play, though, it usually puts pressure without being removed, especially if you have the option to trade some of your characters in to reduce their board so they can't directly deal with it. The draw lines are quite a bit different for this deck. In my experience, you still need your turn 1 play, but it's better to get your card draw turn 1s, so Chernabog or Magic Broom. And I find ideally on turn 2, you want to have 2 1-drops, another Chernabog, a Broom, or a Moana. Having 3 characters on board or maybe 2 if you banish a broom from turn 1. Gives you options for your bounce package without removing all of your characters, or gives you something for Crab to power up and challenge into your opponent, especially if you're playing against something like Steel Song, where they're likely to remove or ping off your characters. It's helpful to have a multitude of 1-drops in the opening, especially if they can result in card draw to help push you along. On turn 3, something like a Fox or Crab, and then into turn 4 we want our card draw, but a Goat is also okay. I think on the draw, you definitely want to put back any locations that you might pull in your opening hand. They're not very effective on the draw. They're an important strategy in this deck, but you'd be better off drawing them in the later parts of the game when they might be a little more helpful, because they're way too much of a tempo loss to play them on curve when you're going second. Alright, let's jump into some gameplay. So we're playing against green-purple. We start off by inking a Goat, playing Chernobog's Followers. It's a good opening card, so we get the choice if we want to banish draw or not on our next play. They do play Curse Merfolk, so we ink a Fox, play Flynn, quest for 1. At this point they don't have a character stronger than Flynn or Chernobog. They could always do a snake bounce here, but they're also likely to play Ursula. So they do play Ursula. We do have a lot of goats in our hand. This is not really ideal. I pulled a bunch in the mulligan and keep drawing them. They're better later in the game, because right now they're pretty much just going to have to get inked. So we take out the Curse Merfolk. We don't want to let them keep getting free questing off with it. I choose to play the Crab here and try and build a bit of a wider board, hoping they don't have a Fox, instead of, playing a Fox and picking up the Chernobog. This could come back to hurt us, but I really want to get the Crab set up for some later stuff, but unfortunately, they do get to kill the Chernobog for free and set up a Fox, so we don't get any Flynn lore. We ink a Fox, play the Genie to draw a card. I want to keep the Crab available to help with removing some of their cards. I don't want to give them the option to trade the Fox into it. They play Emerald Chromacon. This card is something that pretty much changes how you have to play the rest of the game, so you have to be very mindful of the fact that they can at any time bounce any of your readied characters before you get to do something with them, so you need to think about your turn all the way through before you challenge anything. So we have our Crab Sing Friends. We quest with our Genie. Pick up our Crab with Fox. And now we trade Foxes. He has the option to bounce Genie or Flynn. So he does choose to bounce the Genie, which is why we quested with it already. And we put down a second Flynn. They ink a Clarabelle. They play Kit, bouncing back a Flynn. Quest with Diablo, and now it's our turn. So we use Flynn to kill the Diablo. At this point, Flynn's not gaining any lore for us, so I think that, it's worth killing him. There's a high chance that they're going to bounce him back with the Chromacon. So now we can play the Genie and not worry about getting it bounced. We ink Flynn and play Flynn. So our Flynn's still not the stronger character on the board, but it does at least give us the threat that they have to be mindful of keeping a strong character available. They have their kit Sing friends. They play a bonsai and a queen's castle. The queen's castle is a threat that you can't really ignore. Gains a lot of lore, and if they start moving characters there and we lose the opportunity to kill it, we might not easily get that back. So we power up our genie using a crab, play a snake, pick up the crab, and power genie up again, and he's able to take out the queen's castle. Fortunately, it's not a character, so the Emerald Chromacon doesn't trigger, and we trade our Flynn into that kit. I don't want them to bounce the kit and keep using it to get additional bounces in addition to the Chromacon, so it seems like a worthwhile trade. Now we can replay Genie again and get another card draw. Play Chernobog's Followers, and we ink for turn. So now they're loading up the board with high questers. They play a bonsai, merfolk, and a crab, and they quest with the bonsai from last turn. We quest with both our characters, banishing Chernobog to draw a card. At this point they've built a pretty wide board, so it seems like a good time to cast a B-Prep. Any trades that we'd make would result in our characters getting bounced anyway. We ink a Moana for turn, and we put out a Diablo. I've taken the Diablos out of the list since then. I find that the Broom is a little bit more consistent. The Diablo is not a great turn 1 play in this deck because we're not running 4 Crab. And the Broom and the Chernobog can better deal with cards like Cursed Merfolk off the start. So we replay Genie, draw a card, play our Moana Sisu, so now we're building a wide board. And we quest with Diablo. We don't mind if they take out Diablo and give us another card. With this nice wide board, it's going to give us the opportunity to push our lore advantage here. They're the ones having to play catch up with us. They bounce their rabbit to get card draw. They quest and banish their Chernobog. And they play a White Rose, gaining them a lore. So their response is good. The best way to respond to our wide board is to play a wide board of their own. So we quest with all our characters, pushing up 15. Now we play Elsa, exert their Clarabelle, and take it out. This gives them the option to bounce a character. Again, we don't mind if they keep bouncing Genie, because it's giving us a card draw every time that we replay him. So they play a crab, they power up their snake, they're getting ready to do some trades. They ink a go-go, play a rabbit to draw again. So they run their White Rose into Moana. I think they didn't realize that Moana has 3 strength, so they actually have to trade, which is pretty nice, trading our 1 cost into a 3 cost. They do take out Sisu using their powered up snake. They only have 1 card in hand, so the snake does stay alive. We quest up to 18. Brawl the Rabbit to stop the card draw, and this gives them the option, of course, to return one of our characters. I'm happy if they return Genie to draw another card. I'm happy if they return Elsa. Then we can run into Snake. So at this point, the game is pretty well locked up. There's not a lot that they could draw here that's going to get them out of the situation. They are able to bounce a Genie, but that's about it. So we do take the game. We add a B-Prep in hand as a little bit of insurance. So at this matchup, because both decks are relying a lot on challenging and a tempo-based game plan, it's important to try and get a lead on lore and keep that lead on lore, and when they start to make a comeback using our cards like Be Prepared. Thanks for watching the video. As always, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.